The slap came before I even saw her hand move. A sharp crack split the ballroom and my glasses flew from my face, skidding across the marble floor until they shattered in front of the head table. For a moment, 130 guests froze as if the air had been sucked out of the room. My cheek stung, but the ache in my chest was far worse. Juliet, in her gleaming gown, stood in front of me with her chin high. "That's what you get for being so selfish," she hissed. Her voice carried, each word bouncing off the chandeliers. "A woman your age doesn't need so much space." Silence stretched. No one moved toward me as I bent to the floor, my fingers trembling over the broken lenses. My knees pressed against the cold marble, and I felt the weight of every eye like daggers in my back. Some guests turned away, unwilling to witness. Others whispered, their voices sliding like knives through the hush. Not a single hand reached out to help. I looked up, searching for the one person who should have seen me, not as a nuisance, not as an obstacle, but as his mother. Ethan's gaze was fixed on the floorboards, his jaw tight, his posture rigid. My son, the boy I had raised with sleepless nights and small sacrifices, stood as if I had become invisible. "You're not welcome here anymore," Juliet declared, smoothing the satin folds of her dress as if brushing me away like dust. "Ethan and I need our privacy. Your apartment would be perfect for us while we shop for something better." Her words were sugar poured over poison, loud enough for the crowd to hear. Heat rose in my chest, burning against the cool air of the ballroom. I stood slowly, fragments of glass clenched in my hand, the sting of humiliation running hot down my face in tears. I had endured her little barbs for months, about my clothes, my car, my job at the flower shop, each comment a drop of acid. But this was a line scorched into stone. I turned away before the crowd could see me break further. Each step toward the exit felt heavier than the last, the hush behind me swelling into a toxic cloud of whispers. Outside, under the sodium lights of the parking lot, shadows stretched long between the rows of cars. My purse shook in my hands as I fumbled for my phone. "Carlos," I whispered when he answered. "It's Aurora. Come to the Royal Oaks ballroom. Bring the documents. Tonight." His pause was weighted. "Are you sure, Mrs. Hughes? There's no turning back once this begins." I looked back at the golden windows of the ballroom, at the laughter still spilling out as if nothing had happened. My cheek burned, but inside, something colder, harder, had settled. "I've never been more sure," I said. And I waited in the dark, knowing that in 30 minutes, everything would change. The first time Juliet crossed the threshold of my apartment, I felt the shift before her shoes touched the floor. Ethan's hand was warm on my shoulder, his voice carrying that buoyant energy I remembered from childhood surprises. "Mom, this is Juliet," he said, eyes shining with hope. She stepped inside with a fragrance of expensive perfume and the poise of someone already evaluating square footage. Her gaze swept across the modest room, the second-hand sofa, the faded curtains, the photographs on the shelf. Her manicured finger brushed the fabric at the window as if testing its texture for resale. "How cozy," she murmured, lips curved but eyes flat. The word cozy slid into the air like a blade wrapped in silk. Ethan, blinded by his infatuation, missed the cut entirely. I had prepared lemon chicken, roasted potatoes, and a salad from the basil I grew on the balcony. Juliet barely touched her plate. "I'm watching my figure," she explained, her smile reserved for Ethan, not for me. When I asked polite questions, her family, her work, she answered in clipped phrases, redirecting to my finances. "It must be difficult on a widow's pension, Aurora. Do you manage all right?" The feigned concern was sharper than blunt cruelty. After they left, I cleared the untouched food and washed dishes with a heaviness in my chest. The lemon scent stung my nose, bitter as regret. Something in my instincts whispered that her interest in Ethan wasn't just about him. The months that followed were a drip of small humiliations. "Aurora, don't you have anything more modern to wear?" she asked one Sunday, her glance lingering on my cardigan. Another time, sliding into the passenger seat of my car, she wrinkled her nose. "This is so old. Are you sure it's safe for you?" Even my work at the flower shop became ammunition. "At your age, why stand on your feet for hours? Shouldn't you be resting?" Each phrase was small enough to deny but pointed enough to pierce. Her eyes, however, always returned to the apartment. The wide windows with the river view, the generous rooms that had held my family's laughter. I noticed how she lingered at the balcony as if plotting measurements. One afternoon, Ethan excused himself to the bathroom. As I set out tea, I heard her voice in the kitchen, hushed but unmistakable. "Yes, Mom," she said into her phone. "It's in a prime location. If I can get her to move, we could stay here until we buy. She's so naive she might even thank us." I froze in the hallway, my hand tightening around the strap of my worn black purse. The word naive throbbed in my chest like a bruise. When she returned, she carried a mask of innocence so perfect it almost impressed me. I served her tea without letting my hands tremble. After that, the campaign intensified. Brochures appeared on my coffee table. Smiling seniors in pastel cardigans, dining in communal halls, attending watercolor classes. "No maintenance, no worries," Juliet said, spreading the glossy pages like tarot cards. 24-hour staff. You'd make friends." Ethan began repeating her phrases with the sincerity of someone who didn't recognize his own script. "Mom, it could be good. You wouldn't have to carry groceries. Think about your safety." He said safety as if it were a gift, but I felt the walls closing in with every repetition. I held my silence until one evening when the pressure felt heavier than the walls themselves. After they left, I dialed Amelia, an old friend turned real estate agent. "There's a couple very interested in a place like mine," I said carefully. "Could you find out about their finances?" Amelia didn't gossip. She investigated. A week later, she placed a folder on my table. "They're drowning," she said simply. Inside lay the numbers. More than $120,000 in debt. 3 months' rent unpaid. Luxury cars financed beyond reason. A wedding budget of $50,000 built entirely on loans. The veneer of glamour was nothing but cracked porcelain. The revelation should have crushed me. Instead, it clarified. Their fixation on my apartment wasn't about family, love, or concern. It was desperation painted over with false smiles. Carlos, my financial advisor, dug deeper at my request. His voice was steady when he called. "Mrs. Hughes, for the past 6 months, your son has contacted banks about loans against your property. He's inquired about procedures for gaining financial power of attorney over seniors." I sat at my kitchen table, tea cooling in my hands, as the betrayal settled like lead in my chest. My son, who once brought me dandelions as treasures, was planning to strip me of everything I owned. The mask fell completely 2 weeks before the wedding. Juliet arrived with Ethan and her parents, striding into my apartment with the confidence of buyers closing a deal. Her father carried a folder thick with papers. Her mother's smile was as brittle as porcelain. They positioned themselves by my window, where the view glowed with late light. "Aurora, we want what's best for you," her mother began, tone sweet but eyes calculating. Her father opened the folder, tapping figures with satisfaction. "Selling this apartment could fund a residence with full services for years. There'd even be money left to help Ethan and Juliet start their life together." Ethan nodded, silent until prompted, his voice rehearsed. "Mom, we think it would be better for everyone." "For everyone," I repeated, the words tasting of rust. Their plan was rehearsed too perfectly. They spoke of safety, companionship, medical services, but beneath every word was a single truth. My home, my sacrifice, my memories had become their lifeline. And if I refuse? I asked quietly. A pause, then Juliet's father leaned back. Let's not let it come to that. If cognitive issues arise, the courts can help ensure the right decisions are made. His words were smooth, professional, but the threat was sharp. Juliet placed a gentle hand on Ethan's knee, her eyes on me. We only want what's best, Aurora. Something inside me shifted. Not a flare of anger, but a steady burn that straightened my spine. They were not speaking of my well-being. They were circling prey. When they left, brochures still spread across my table. I walked to the kitchen phone and dialed Carlos. Prepare the documents, I said. I may need to reveal truths I've kept hidden. He paused. Are you sure? Once this starts, there is no way back. I'm sure, I replied. My voice surprised me with its steadiness. That night, I opened the brown folder from my desk drawer. Bank statements with balances that could change lives. Titles to properties no one imagined I owned. The truth I had kept invisible for decades to protect my family. My hand rested on the deeds, and I thought of Robert's mantra. Visible wealth attracts problems. Invisible wealth gives you power. I had hoped never to use that power against my own child. In the weeks leading to the wedding, Juliet still arrived with flowers, still dropped her little daggers. Ethan still echoed her lines, more strained each time, but my decision had already hardened. I had signed what needed signing with Carlos. I was ready. On the morning of the ceremony, I watered the basil on my balcony and fastened the small silver studs Robert had once given me. The city shimmered in the sunlight, oblivious to the storm brewing. I pressed my palm to the balcony glass and whispered to my reflection. Appearances are deceiving. That afternoon, walking into the ballroom, I carried my worn black purse. Inside, tucked against a folded handkerchief, lay the number I would dial if pushed past the last boundary. The slap was only the spark. The fire had been smoldering for years. The parking lot glowed with long shadows under the street lamps, each pool of light stretched like bars on a cage. I sat behind the wheel of my sedan, the cracked leather seat pressing into my back. My cheek still burned from Juliet's slap, but the deeper sting pulsed in my chest, steady and raw. I checked the dashboard clock. 27 minutes since I had called Carlos. Each second dragged like an anchor through mud. The muffled sounds of the ballroom floated across the asphalt. Music, laughter, the faint clink of champagne glasses. To them, the night was glitter and promise. To me, it had become the battlefield where my dignity had been stripped. I clutched the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. Images crashed over me in waves. Juliet wrinkling her nose at my sofa, her laugh as she fingered my cardigan, Ethan parroting her words about safety. Each memory stacked like bricks on my chest until I could barely breathe. I had endured for Ethan's sake, telling myself love meant patience, sacrifice, silence, but tonight, silence had become complicity. I reached for my purse and pulled out my phone again. My hands shook, not from fear, but from clarity. Joseph, I whispered when he answered. It's Aurora. I need you to do me a favor. There's a brown folder in the second drawer of my desk. Bring it to me now. There was no hesitation. Joseph had been my neighbor for nearly 20 years, a widower himself, the kind of man who watered my plants when I traveled and fixed my balcony latch without asking. I'll be right there, he said. His voice was steady, though I could hear the alarm beneath it. The minutes crawled. I watched headlights sweep in and out of the lot, each not his. Finally, his old hatchback rolled up, coughing slightly as it parked. Joseph climbed out, folder in hand, his expression taut with worry. Aura, what's happening? You look like you've been through hell. I told him everything. Juliet's slap, the public humiliation, the demand for my apartment. As I spoke, I saw his jaw tighten, his eyes narrow with anger. That woman is poison, he muttered. I always knew. He pressed the folder into my hands. Whatever you're planning, you won't face it alone. I wanted to cry at that, but the tears had already been spent. Thank you, Joseph. After tonight, many things will change. I just need you to trust me. He nodded, his eyes glistening. You've always been family to me, Aurora. Do what you must. When he left, I opened the folder under the dim glow of the street lamp. The papers smelled faintly of dust and ink. First, a bank statement, $5,400,000 in investments. Next, the deed to a downtown office building, generating $50,000 a month in rent. Then, the title to the beach house Robert and I had bought a decade ago. My throat tightened as I touched each page. These were the hidden threads of a life Robert and I had built in deliberate invisibility. And then came the documents that hurt the most, records of monthly transfers to Ethan. $4,500 here, $2,200 there. Quiet deposits that had kept him afloat for 3 years. Credit card bills I had paid, rent I had secretly subsidized, even wedding deposits siphoned from my accounts. Ethan had believed in luck, bonuses, tax refunds. In truth, it had been me. The irony sliced deep. While Juliet mocked my clothes and car, while Ethan allowed her to humiliate me, I had been the invisible foundation of their life. And now they plotted to strip me of the only home Robert and I had chosen for love, not profit. I closed the folder and held it against my chest, letting the weight of truth ground me. This was not about revenge. It was about justice, about ending a cycle of exploitation I had foolishly enabled. Headlights swept across the lot again, brighter this time, slowing as they neared. Carlos's sleek sedan rolled to a stop beside mine. He stepped out, briefcase in hand, his silhouette neat in the lamplight. His calm presence steadied me. Mrs. Hughes, he greeted, voice low but firm. Are you certain? I rose from the car, folder tucked under my arm. I've never been more certain in my life. We walked to the hood of his car, where he laid out papers clipped with precision. Here is the order suspending all transfers to Ethan Hughes. Here is the cancellation of the lease guarantee. And here, the ballroom payment revocation. I signed each with trembling but determined hands. Every stroke of ink severed another cord I had tied to protect a son who had chosen betrayal. This isn't cruelty, Carlos, I said softly. It's the only way he'll learn. He nodded, his eyes filled with something between respect and sorrow. I understand. In 3 decades of advising, I've rarely seen such courage. I straightened, feeling the burn on my cheek transform into a scar of resolve. Then let's finish it. We turned together toward the ballroom. The golden windows glowed, laughter spilling into the night. My heart pounded, not with fear, but with anticipation. With each step, I shed the skin of the meek widow I had pretended to be. Inside, the music faltered as the doors opened. 130 faces turned, conversation freezing mid-sentence. Phones lifted instinctively, the scent of scandal thick in the air. Juliet's smile wavered, her eyes sharpening with recognition. Ethan's mouth fell slightly open, confusion clouding his gaze. Carlos cleared his throat, his voice cutting through the hush with surgical precision. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for interrupting. I have urgent legal matters to discuss with Mr. Ethan Hughes and Mrs. Juliet Dawson. The silence deepened, heavy as stone. And in that silence, I stepped forward, the folder pressed against my chest, ready to show them the real Aurora Hughes. The chandeliers seemed to flicker when Carlos's voice rang out. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for this interruption, but I have urgent legal matters to address with Mr. Ethan Hughes and Mrs. Juliet Dawson. The room froze. 130 faces tilted toward us, forks suspended over plates, wine glasses half raised. Phones appeared in hands like reflexes. Some guests, already filming, instinctively sensing they were about to witness something unforgettable. Juliet was the first to break the silence. "What are you doing here, Aurora?" she snapped, her voice sharp enough to slice through the still air. She stood at the center of the dance floor in her flawless gown, the train pooled like snow. "You already left once. Wasn't that enough drama for one night?" I could feel the sting on my cheek, as though her hand had struck me again. But my voice came steadier than I expected. "Not quite." Ethan approached, his face pale, tie askew. "Mom, what's happening? Who is this man?" "This," I said, my tone slicing as clean as Carlos's, "is Carlos Jones, my financial advisor. He has documents you will find illuminating." Carlos opened his folder, adjusting his glasses with deliberate calm. "Mr. Ethan Hughes, effective immediately, the financial guarantee provided by your mother for your apartment lease has been canceled. Your landlord will be notified tomorrow morning. You have 30 days to find a new guarantor or vacate." The words detonated in the room. Ethan's face drained of color. "Financial guarantee?" he repeated, his voice cracking. "Mom, what is he talking about?" But Carlos didn't pause. "Furthermore, the monthly transfers of $4,500 your mother has been making to your accounts are terminated as of tonight. These include payments toward credit cards, car insurance, and other living expenses." Gasps swept the ballroom like a gust of wind. Juliet lurched forward, eyes wild. "That's impossible! Ethan doesn't have a rich mother. Look at her! Look at her clothes, her car! She works in a flower shop. She lives on a miserable pension." Her hysteria only sharpened the fascination of the guests. People whispered, craned their necks, their phones held higher. Carlos raised the final document. "Lastly, the guaranteed payment for this evening's celebration has been revoked. The ballroom management is within its rights to demand full payment before guests depart tonight." A ripple of unease surged across the tables. Some guests exchanged nervous looks, others clutched purses, sensing chaos. Ethan staggered back as if struck. "You," he murmured, staring at me with wide eyes. "You've been, all this time, paying for everything?" "For 3 years," I confirmed, my voice calm though my chest hammered. 3 years of quiet deposits and hidden rescues. 3 years of believing you'd remember the values I taught you. Juliet's hands clutched her veil as though she could hide behind it. "No, no, this can't be true. She's lying. She's poor." "Appearances are deceiving," I said softly, finally lowering the mask I had worn for decades. The murmurs swelled. Some guests already had tears in their eyes. Others stared with a mixture of awe and discomfort. Carlos wasn't finished. He pulled another page free. "Mr. Hughes, your mother has amended her will. All assets previously designated for you have been redirected to charities protecting seniors from family abuse." The words fell like thunder. Juliet stumbled, her knees buckling until she collapsed into a chair, makeup streaking down her cheeks. "You can't!" she screamed. "He's your only son! You can't cut him out over a stupid fight!" "A stupid fight?" I repeated, my voice rising for the first time. "You call slapping me in front of 130 witnesses a fight? You call conspiring with your parents to strip me of my home a fight? You call months of humiliation and manipulation a fight?" The ballroom seemed to lean closer, every guest riveted. Several nodded grimly, recalling the slap that had started the evening's collapse. Phones recorded every word. Ethan took a hesitant step toward me. "Mom, please. There has to be another way. We didn't know. We thought you needed help. We thought you couldn't take care of yourself." "You didn't know?" My voice rang sharp. "You didn't know you brought an appraiser to my building behind my back? You didn't know you searched legal ways to declare me incompetent? You didn't know your fiancé whispered about how naive I was while plotting to live here?" Each question carved deeper until Ethan's shoulders sagged, his eyes downcast. Juliet's father finally stood, sweat beading at his temple. "Mrs. Hughes, surely emotions are high. Perhaps we can discuss this privately?" I turned to him, my tone ironclad. "No. You chose to make my humiliation public. My response will remain public." The guests' heads turned like spectators at a tennis match, eyes flicking between us. Some clapped quietly, emboldened by the clarity of truth. Carlos snapped his folder closed. All documents have been delivered and explained. The legal effects begin immediately. Juliet's sobs filled the silence, jagged and raw. Ethan stood frozen beside her, his world collapsing in front of every camera, every eye. I stepped closer, my voice cold but steady. What's destroyed tonight isn't your wedding. It's the illusion that you could treat people like objects without consequence. This is what happens when you mistake kindness for weakness. For the first time in months, I looked Ethan in the eye. There is a way forward, but it begins with respect, responsibility, and repentance. Without those, you will find no help here. Not from me, not from my name, not from my wealth. The room held its breath. Behind us, the ballroom manager had begun to stir, his brow furrowed, contract in hand. The reality of unpaid bills loomed like a shadow over the glitter. Guests whispered, shuffled, some already edging toward the exits. And just as the tension reached its breaking point, Juliet's father tried one last time. "Mrs. Hughes, please, surely we can settle this without further embarrassment. Let us speak in private, for the sake of family." I lifted my chin, the weight of the folder steady in my arms. There is nothing left to discuss in private. The truth belongs in the same light where you tried to shame me. The chandeliers sparkled above, but all that glitter now hung over Juliet and Ethan like shards of glass, suspended, waiting to fall. The ballroom manager's shoes clicked against the polished floor as he approached, a stack of papers under one arm, his jaw set in professional impatience. "Mrs. Hughes," he said, his voice low but caring, "I have just received a notice of payment cancellation. The balance owed for this evening, $53,000, must be resolved tonight." The words rolled across the room like thunder. Conversations stuttered into silence again. A violinist set his bow down as though the music itself had been dismissed. Juliet staggered to her feet, her gown wrinkled, her makeup streaked into harsh lines. "You can't do this!" she shouted, pointing at me with a trembling hand. "It's our wedding day. You can't ruin it over money problems." The manager's expression didn't change. "Madam, I am not ruining anything. I am enforcing the contract you signed. If payment is not provided immediately, services will be suspended, and guests will be asked to leave." A murmur rose from the tables. Some guests clutched purses, others slipped their phones into pockets, the thrill of gossip colliding with the discomfort of unpaid bills. Ethan stumbled forward, desperation creeping into his voice. "There must be some mistake. Mom, she wouldn't do this. She can't." He turned toward me, his eyes bloodshot, his voice pitched higher than I remembered from his boyhood tantrums. "Mom, please, think of the guests. Think of the photos, the memories. You can't destroy this for us." "Destroy this?" My voice came out calm, almost chilling in its steadiness. "I am not destroying anything. You destroyed it the moment you chose greed over love. The moment you let humiliation replace respect." The ballroom manager cleared his throat. "Someone must step forward. Payment, now." Juliet's parents scrambled from their seats, pale with dawning realization. Her father's booming voice cracked. "Surely this can wait until tomorrow. We'll arrange something. Please, give us until then." "No extensions," the manager replied. "The contract is explicit. Payment tonight or immediate suspension." A heavy silence swallowed the hall. Guests shifted uncomfortably, the gilded glamour of the wedding dissolving into the sour stench of financial ruin. Then, from the back of the room, a chair scraped. A figure rose. A slender young woman with tear-streaked cheeks, trembling but determined. Lucy, my niece, Ethan's younger sister. "Wait," she said, her voice carrying farther than her frame suggested. "Aunt Aurora, please." She ran down the aisle between the tables, her shoes clicking like punctuation marks. When she reached me, she grasped my hands, her eyes brimming with sincerity. "I didn't know," she whispered, loud enough for others to hear. "I swear, I didn't know what Ethan and Juliet planned. If I had, I would have tried to stop them." Her words cracked something in me that had grown hard as stone. For a moment, I saw the little girl I had once braided hair for, the child who had run into my apartment for cookies after school. "I know, Lucy," I murmured, brushing her damp cheek. "You have always been different." She turned to the guests, her voice rising with unexpected strength. "This woman, my aunt, has done nothing but love this family, and tonight she was humiliated. You all saw it. She was slapped, she was mocked, and none of you lifted a hand to defend her. But now you see the truth. She is not weak. She is not disposable. She is the one with dignity here." The ballroom hushed, every eye fixed on her. Juliet sputtered from across the dance floor. "She's manipulating you. Don't listen." "Manipulation?" Lucy snapped back, surprising even me with her fire. "The only manipulation has come from you, Juliet, from months of whispers, from lies, from threats against the woman who has carried this family more than you'll ever know." Gasps erupted. Several guests clapped hesitantly, then more joined, until a ripple of applause filled the hall. Juliet froze, her mouth open, her face blotched red with fury. Ethan, shaking, dropped into a chair, as though his legs could no longer hold him. "Lucy, stop," he muttered, but his voice lacked force. The manager tapped his papers against his palm. "Ladies and gentlemen, I must insist again. Payment." Juliet's father raised his hands in protest. "We can pool together, perhaps." "No," I said sharply, silencing him. I stepped forward, lifting my chin, letting my voice carry across every gilded corner of the room. "There will be no pooling of funds, no quiet negotiations in back rooms. This night began with my public humiliation. It will end with public truth." I turned to Ethan and Juliet, their broken postures stark against the opulence of the hall. "You wanted my apartment. You wanted my name. You wanted everything I had built in silence with your father. And you thought you could strip me of it with whispers and staged concern. But you forgot the one thing money cannot buy: dignity. Tonight, you will pay for what you tried to steal, not in dollars, but in consequences." Phones lifted again, the glowing screens recording every syllable. The guests leaned forward, captivated, caught in the current of the spectacle. Juliet shrieked, her voice ragged. "You'll regret this! You can't turn everyone against us!" "I don't need to turn them," I said coldly. "You did that yourself when you struck me in front of them all." The room erupted, some clapping, others murmuring agreement. A woman near the head table whispered, "I saw it with my own eyes. She slapped her." Ethan rose shakily, his hands trembling. "Mom," he said, his voice softer now, almost childlike. "Please, there has to be a way to fix this." I studied him, my heart aching with the memory of the boy he once was, the boy who had defended me on playgrounds, who had whispered secrets before bed. But the man standing here now was a stranger. "The only way to fix this," I said, "was not to break it in the first place." Silence crashed back down. Juliet sagged into her chair, sobbing uncontrollably, her gown a crumpled heap around her. Ethan's gaze darted to the manager, then back to me, realizing at last that the safety net had been severed forever. Carlos stepped forward, his folder closed, his voice crisp. "All documents have been delivered. The legal processes begin tonight. I advise you both to seek your own counsel immediately." The manager gave a curt nod. "Then until payment is resolved, I will suspend service." He gestured toward the musicians, who began packing instruments. Waiters froze mid-step, uncertain whether to pour or retreat. The celebration dissolved before our eyes. 130 guests shuffled awkwardly, whispers swelling into a tide. Some left quietly, slipping coats over sequined dresses. Others lingered, hungry for the last drop of spectacle. Through it all, Lucy held my hand, her grip steady, her presence a lifeline. "You did it," she whispered. "You showed them all who you really are." I exhaled, a weight lifting that I hadn't realized I still carried. For the first time in years, I stood unmasked. Juliet's father tried one final plea. "Mrs. Hughes, surely—" I cut him off. "No. The time for negotiations ended when your daughter struck me. What happens now will happen in the open, before every person who watched me kneel to pick up broken glass." The chandeliers glittered above us, cold and unyielding. The manager's voice echoed as he declared, "Without payment, this event is concluded." And with that, the night of Juliet's perfect wedding collapsed into chaos. Guests streamed toward the exits. The newlyweds sat in ruins, their empire of lies disintegrating under the bright lights they had once craved. I turned toward the doors, Carlos at my side, Lucy still gripping my hand. Behind me, the echoes of sobs and whispers lingered like smoke. For the first time in years, my steps were steady. For the first time, I no longer felt small. Tonight, I had reclaimed my dignity. And tomorrow, the consequences of truth would begin. 3 days after the wedding, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. Ethan's voice filled my voicemail 37 times, each message a different shade of desperation. Anger, pleading, then hollow silence. Juliet's texts dripped with hysteria, 14 in all, ranging from insults to threats to pitiful emojis. Twice, her parents pounded on my door, their fury echoing down the hallway. I never answered. Instead, Joseph arrived each morning with coffee and warm pastries, his quiet presence reminding me that chosen family sometimes steadies us more than blood ever could. "That night was the moment you reclaimed yourself," he said gently, setting the cup on my kitchen table. "Don't you forget it." By the end of the week, Carlos returned with his precise updates. "Mrs. Hughes," he reported as we sipped tea on my balcony, "the ballroom has initiated legal proceedings. Ethan and Juliet were evicted from their apartment yesterday. Their credit cards are frozen. Their vehicles face repossession. They are living with Juliet's parents in a cramped 2-bedroom. Tensions are considerable." His measured tone left no doubt. Collapse had begun. I listened, not with triumph, but with a strange mixture of grief and release. For years, I had poured lifelines into their sinking ship. Now, watching it finally sink, I realized I could not keep patching holes in a vessel determined to sabotage itself. The real blow came when Lucy appeared one afternoon with Amelia and Joseph in tow, a folder clutched in her hands. Her face was pale, her voice trembling. "Aunt Aurora," she said, "I've uncovered something else. They were preparing Plan B. Juliet consulted lawyers about declaring you incompetent. They've been telling neighbors you're senile, collecting statements from wedding guests to prove it." Her words struck deeper than any slap. They hadn't only wanted my apartment, they had wanted my mind. They were building a case to erase me. But Amelia placed her hand firmly on mine. "There's something they underestimated. The world has already seen the truth. Those videos from the ballroom, they've gone viral. People aren't seeing a confused old woman. They're seeing a dignified woman who stood up to abuse. You've become a symbol, Aurora." It was surreal. Comments poured across the internet. Strangers calling me courageous, thanking me for showing that age does not erase dignity. For the first time, I realized my pain could serve a greater purpose. 6 months later, that purpose took the form of bright lights and television cameras. I sat across from Catherine Diaz, one of the most respected journalists in the country, on her program Stories of a Lifetime. She looked at me warmly. "Mrs. Hughes, your story has inspired millions. How does it feel to know you've become a voice for so many?" I answered with honesty. "Grateful. Grateful that what nearly broke me has helped others find their strength. Grateful that silence was shattered. The interview lasted 45 minutes. I spoke of quiet humiliations, of invisible wealth chosen not to flaunt, but to protect, of the night I decided enough was enough. Carlos explained the legal battle that followed, how Ethan and Juliet's petition crumbled when evidence of their manipulation surfaced. They not only lost, they were fined for frivolity, drowning further in debt. The cameras captured my tears when Catherine asked about Ethan. "Do you still love him?" "Yes," I said softly. "I always will. But loving someone doesn't mean letting them destroy you. Loving someone doesn't mean surrendering your dignity. If my son ever returns to me, it must be as the man I tried to raise, honorable, responsible, respectful." The broadcast touched millions. Letters flooded in, hundreds from seniors who had endured their own silent battles. Many said the same thing. "I thought I was alone. Now I know I am not." 2 years have passed since that night divided my life into before and after. Today, I sit on my balcony overlooking the same street Juliet once appraised with greedy eyes. But the view is different now. The space has become headquarters for the Aurora Hughes Foundation for the Protection of Seniors. We've helped more than 400 people regain their homes, savings, and most importantly, their self-respect. Joseph serves as vice president, giving talks on recognizing manipulation. Lucy runs education programs, teaching families that love without respect is nothing more than exploitation. The work has given me a new rhythm. 3 days a week at the foundation, 2 visiting seniors in their homes. Weekends dedicated to writing. My book, When Love Hurts, An Elderly Woman Fights Back, became a bestseller. Every royalty goes straight to the foundation. In my office, Ethan's old bedroom, the walls are covered with thank you letters and photos of families we've helped heal. I still ache when I think of my grandson, Oliver, born a year ago. I have never held him. Juliet sends occasional messages dripping with desperation, but always asking for money, never offering remorse. Ethan called 3 times in 2 years, each time with the same request: help, not apology. I created a trust for Oliver's education regardless. Love does not vanish, but boundaries remain. What surprises me most is how light my body feels. The insomnia is gone. My doctor says I carry the blood pressure of a woman 10 years younger. I walk taller. My hands no longer tremble when I sign documents. Freedom from manipulation has given me back not just dignity, but health. Tomorrow, I will meet with senators to discuss legislation protecting elders from financial coercion. Next month, we open our 3rd regional office. I am 70 now, but my life feels newly born. Do I regret what I did that night? Not for a moment, because sometimes the only way to save a relationship is to be willing to lose it. Sometimes the bravest act of love, for yourself, for your children, for the future, is to demand respect at any cost. If you're listening, ask yourself, what would you do if the people closest to you treated your kindness as weakness? Would you let them? Or would you choose, finally, to stand? For me, the answer has written a new life, and it is never too late to begin again. I invite you, wherever you are, to share your own story. Have you faced betrayal, silence, or manipulation within your family? Tell me in the comments. And if stories like mine speak to you, don't miss what comes next. Subscribe to Roots and Secrets, join this community, and let's ensure no one ever feels alone when standing up for their dignity.